Alondraño, will you lead us, please? Thank you.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If we could stand and have a moment of silence for the officer that we'll have a funeral for this afternoon, David Ortiz, that unfortunately had a tragic accident, and please keep him and his family and all officers in the city of El Paso in your prayers. Thank you. And also the governor did grant the city of El Paso to be able to fly all the flags for the day of the funeral, which is today at half-mast, so all city and state offices. And let's see. I know where it's around.
To the right.
Okay, and we also like to introduce someone that's here for the first time and congratulate Ms. Lina Ortega that won the election. Will be joining us soon, so congratulations. Thank you. And we look forward to working with you at the beginning of the year. And with that, we'll go to you. And I'll start, I know this out of order, but I want to Mayor Trujillo from Anthony, New Mexico, congratulations and welcome. I know you've been here with us, was in your rep, and congratulations on winning your election. Oh, well, I would have to find my notes again, Michael. There we go. And Jean Polk is here with us. She's a proxy vote for Trent Doolittle from New Mexico TxDOT. Welcome. Thank you.
Congratulations on winning your election to be proxy.
I was voluntold. 1-0 vote?
It's not big dot. Okay, it's an M dot.
That's true.
I put in MDOT.
You did. Go ahead.
We're going to go ahead and start with public comment. Mr. Rooney?
She did.
Thank you. I want to thank TxDOT. I had put in a Texas Open Records request for that Hawkins Street extension study. They were very gracious and helpful. This was a study going back to 1997 to improve Hawkins Street. You get down to North Loop, and it was an effort to consider putting a bridge over the railroad tracks and connecting to Alameda. It certainly wasn't any weenie study. It was about just under $400,000 in those days cost. It was in three ring folders, and it was very detailed, had all the staff notes and stuff. And so apparently TxDOT had to do a lot of digging to get it. I got to talk to the engineer who back then actually was one of the people that worked on it. And just like Mr. Berry had told me on numerous occasions, that engineer said he thought it today was a very good project. Mr. Bielik and Mike Medina, they're going to have it briefed to you next month. And my interest in the thing is, do we have an opportunity that ought to be at least considered? You don't have to make a decision. It's in the 2040 plan for 2040. Is it a project that would be worthy to move up into maybe the 10, 12 year time frame? The reason the bridge couldn't be put in back then was the steep grade, because they had cranes running underneath it. Those cranes have been moved to Strauss, New Mexico, just like tomorrow's effort to close the road rather than Sunday. Tomorrow, we had worked with our delegation from New Mexico, our partners, in a collaborative move to to support that effort to do the Strauss Railroad Track Initiative, which was an important economic development for New Mexico. There were reservations here about losing any jobs. Those were overcome, and I think it was unanimous support. So the railroad ought to be willing to work with us if we find it's a viable project. My concern is many of the members here on the MPO weren't even here then, so you may not be aware of that opportunity. Representative Pickett, I think also Emma Acosta, Ted Marcus, Council Mayor Prano, Mayor Miller were here. I think Eduardo Cavo, but you may not be aware of that opportunity. All I want you to do is know about it. The big problem back then, there was an effort to extend Lee Trevino from North Loop to Interstate 10. It was soundly defeated because of the uproar of the people in the neighborhood who were prepared to mount a recall effort. Then immediately somebody said, well, let's put bridging over the main roads on Zaragoza. Again, it would have impacted too many people. So is this an opportunity to at least consider a golden nugget opportunity we might have? No decision. I'm not asking for a decision. Just next month, consider it. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
And we're going to go ahead and take this a little bit out of order because we do want to take all discussion and action items first to give people the opportunity that are going to attend the funeral. If we do start running long, they have the opportunity to leave, and if we lose quorum, we can go on non-action items and continue the meeting.
So we'll start with discussion and action item number 2, and that is approve the minutes for the February 19, 2016 Transportation Policy Board meeting with an administrative correction to excuse New Mexico State Senator Joseph Cervantes for the January and February meetings due to being in legislation, so that'll be noted in both documents.
Move to approve?
A motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Next item is number 3, approve the recommendation from the Executive Committee on the evaluation and template for the Executive Director's annual review and set of date for evaluation.
Okay, the Executive Committee.
You want to use your microphone, please? Thank you.
The Executive Committee was tasked with developing the an annual review form to present to the TPB, so for the evaluation and review of the Executive Director at an annual basis. On February 12th, we met and requested a draft template of the 2016 evaluation form, and also requested a summary report response. On March the 11th, we reviewed those two forms, and there was only one amendment, maybe I should say, or addition, and it was at the end of the form. You can see the comment session. So we put it today for approval. Any comments?
Any comments? Do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, number 4.
Item number 4, approve the recommendation from the Transportation Project Advisory Committee to amend the Horizon 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Horizon 2015-18 Transportation Improvement Program to program the New Mexico 136 Pete Domenici Highway Road Improvements Project MPO ID number 614C-CNE100080 to include pavement rehabilitation, bridge maintenance, and drainage improvements in fiscal year 2018, using $16 million of National Highway Performance Program funds.
Good morning again, sir.
This is a pretty straightforward project. I know we've got representatives from New Mexico if they need to help answer any questions y'all might have. So I'm going to turn the floor back to y'all for questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, sir.
New Mexico DOT request a floor amendment to change the CN number associated with this project as it's shown in the documents.
Okay. You want to read that?
The CN number, MPO ID number 614C/CNE100080. The request is to change that to 81 to correct.
Okay. Thank you for that.
What happens if we deny that?
We haven't had, Chairman Pickett, we have not had a second yet. We do have a motion. Do we have a second? Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next is item number 5, approved to excuse absent Transportation Policy Board members from the meeting, and that was Mr. Doolittle, David Garcia from Doña County, Marisa Marquez, State Representative, District 77, Mayor Javier Perea, and Representative Courtney Nyland.
Move to approve.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Next, we'll go to reports, and we have the Executive Director's report on number A, schedule for the Amendment Horizon 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and the Horizon 2017-2040 Transportation Improvement Program Development.
Good morning. Roger Williams with the El Paso MPO.
Good morning, sir.
We went through this last month, but I'm going to go ahead and break down the schedule again for our development of the amended Horizon 2040 MTP and the Horizon 2017 to 2020 TIP. The TIP 2017 to 20 is required as per every 2 years we develop a new TIP, and this is replacing the 15 to 18 TIP. And the amendment to the Horizon 2040 MTP is to bring in some capacity projects that are not currently in that plan. So in unison, we'll be developing both of these documents together. The top timeline there extends from today, basically, through the November timeframe of this year. And what you'll see underneath that there is where we're doing right now, coordination with the agencies on the development of the projects that will be amended into these documents. So that's an ongoing coordination, and it will continue. The line is drawn out through basically the June TPB, where the policy board will take action on the documents. So then during that time frame, you'll see in the box down below for the April TPAC and the April TPB, where we'll be coming back to make recommendations for projects that'll be included in those documents. So it will be clear as to what it is that we're asking for in those documents, rather than you seeing a couple of months later just the documents. So we'll have isolated what it is that's actually going on, so that you'll be able to make recommendations, or the TPAC can make recommendations and the TPB can approve those, at which point then we move forward and into the public involvement timeframe, where we're still coordinating the development of the documents with the agencies. But as of May the 18th through June 16th, we'll actually be doing the public involvement to receive comment back from the public on any issues that may arise from their perspective on the projects that are in those documents. So basically that brings us into the June timeframe, where you'll see there in the box down below that the TPAC will make recommendations on the documents themselves. The TPB will then have the documents for approval, and that'll be right after the end of the public involvement timeframe. So then the next line there where the documents are submitted into the TIP for inclusion in the STIP happens after the TPB makes the approval of the documents. By the time the TPB makes the approval of the documents, you've already seen everything that's going on in the documents. You've had the opportunity to hear from the public on any issues that might arise in those documents. And then from the time we get the approval from the TPB, we'll then move the documents to the next stage where we submit actually all of the documents for conformity review, because it's going to require conformity because of the changes to the added capacity projects in the documents. So we'll be forwarding those on to Federal Highway, Federal Transit Administration, and the TIP then at that point will also be reviewed by them, but it'll kind of take a little bit different path in that it'll actually be submitted into the STIP for the inclusion through their process to include more public involvement at the state level. So then the TIP goes through that process, moving us all the way through basically where we're getting into the September and October timeframe. In September, what the goal is to have the conformity approval on the documents. So all of the added capacity projects are then examined for air quality purposes and should be found to be conforming, and that then once those documents are conforming documents, and hopefully around the September timeframe, the new fiscal year starts in October of this year for 2017, which is where the new TIP can come in effect if it's approved at that time in the STIP. So the timing is usually not exact as of October the 1st. It usually takes maybe another month or so, but it could be, and that's why if you drop on down to the red line at the bottom, that's the earliest date we could get the TIP approval. And if the TIP's approved in the STIP and the conformity is in place at the time, we're able to operate out of the 1720 TIP, and we're at that time the TIP is included in the STIP, and we're able to operate out of the STIP, and everything is then under the new plan being the amended Horizon 2040 MTP. We're currently, and I'll come on back up to the line right above that, which is the next to the bottom line right there. We continue to operate throughout all of this time frame from now until we get approval for conformity and the new TIP into the STIP out of the current TIP and the current plan. So there's still opportunities. There's one coming up in May that could be an opportunity to amend projects in the TIP with our current plan, and that should be at this point the last opportunity. But there, at that point, we're still in that document. So it's not to say that something couldn't come up and we can't amend those documents again, because it's a possibility. What my point is until the new documents are approved, we're still in the current documents and operating out of them. So the last thing is the yellow line there, the third from the bottom. We've had a call for projects for TAP and CMAQ. We're doing this in unison with the development of our documents, that being the 17-20 timeframe of the new TIP is where we've had a call for 17 and 20 for TAP and CMAQ. So we're coordinating all that effort as we speak to get TAP projects back to the TPB for approval in the May timeframe, and then in June we'll be bringing the documents themselves, but the TAP projects won't be included in there because we've already started public involvement. In July, after you approve the documents, we'll come back for approval of the CMAQ projects. Again, they won't be in the initial documents because they've already gone through public review. But when we get over here to this, to the end here, the last box you'll see with approval of the 2017 to 20 STIP, the El Paso MPO will be able to make amendments to the 1720 TIP STIP in about the November timeframe, which is your first opportunity. So all the work we're doing for the call for projects right now for non-added capacity projects will not affect conformity. As soon as we get our 1720 TIP approved, the added capacity projects for non-added capacity projects for 1720 that we're currently having the call will be amended into those documents. So they will be there in time to initiate in 2017. and that'll include 18, 19, and 20 throughout the whole document. So that's my report on the timeline for the development of our documents, and the call for projects will further explain that here in the next portion of the Executive Director's report.
Roger, you clarified, I think, part of it. If the Texas Transportation Commission amends the Unified Transportation Plan, the UTP, and there are projects that are in our long-range MTP that would be required, moved up to the short-term Transportation Improvement Program, when would be the soonest to amend that as one? And would you remind the board what requirements we would have for public involvement on some of those projects if we were to move them forward? For instance, possibly US 54, an additional lane, which is added capacity, but the conformity, I don't know if it's met because it's in the long-term plan. And then, Mr. Bielek, kind of a question, if we do some improvements at Montwood and Zaragoza, is that considered operational improvements, or is that added capacity? Because those are some projects that may be considered by the commission at their next Unified Transportation Program.
Okay, there's two things going on here. One of those projects is an added capacity project, and it requires conformity. So it's very important, and this is one of the projects that we've made a recommendation to TxDOT. We've made recommendations to the city and to the county and to TxDOT on some added capacity projects where we can help out with funding. US 54 being an added capacity project, and with our update, or I should say amendment to the plan, which requires conformity, and when the TPB approves this in June, we need to make sure that that project is in there for added capacity purposes, for conformity purposes, because then you'll be able to come back and say you can include that in the TIP with the funding, and fiscal constraint being the key to that. So that's a very critical project to make sure that it's constrained and that it's there for capacity purposes so that we can amend that. Now, where does it go? If it's a 2017 project where we expect it at this point to be, we would already have included that in our 1720 TIP that would be here for the TPB's approval in June. Now, with that said, it has to go through the it's already in the conformity as well right now, today. The key, though, is the funding. So it could be amended in the current TIP as well because it's already in the conformity. But we have to be very careful with the new document that we're doing right now because of the 2020 network, where that project is at, and it needs to fall in the TIP. For the new TIP, we need to keep it in the 2020 network of the amended document with funding so that we can get conformity on it. The other one is not nearly as complicated. At least the Montwood, the Zaragoza portion, it's considered operational. It's an operational improvement. The Montwood, the Montwood portion for the added capacity, our understanding with the city of El Paso is this is not going to happen in this time frame of 2020, but that will be included in a future amendment to the 2030 network when the timing is right. But for the operational improvement portion, if we find funds for it, we can put it in the document at any time when we find the funding, when we can amend the TIP. It's not the same as an added capacity project.
So just to recap, US 54, as I said, is added capacity. And if we find out at the next amended Unified Transportation Program, Bob, that's going to be around
I think May.
May. So if we know sometime around May, are you recommending to amend the current TIP or include it in what you're working on as the new TIP?
Okay. In the May timeframe where you're talking about.
And the public involvement.
We're in public involvement at that time. Okay. So best case scenario is that project is there when we go out for public review. But then you've got the issue of the TTC being the end of the month in May, and depending on what that funding is that the TTC may approve for it, we haven't got a reasonable, maybe we do, I'm telling you right now, though, in our documents, I don't see that TTC funding, okay, yet. It's difficult for me to tie it to that project. So we start public review, I haven't seen those funds yet. But when we get into public review, we see the funds. But in the meantime, the MPO has come back and made a recommendation on how to fund that project through other funding mechanisms. I think it's important that we keep that project in there, have it there, and it meets our needs to keep it in for conformity and fiscal constraint. And if the TTC comes back and says, well, we're gonna give you additional funding or different funding that can be put on this project, the main thing is that we got the project in our documents and it's out for public review, and we can potentially swap the funding. Which document, which tip would it go in? Our indication is the last opportunity to amend the current tip is the May revision. By that time, the May revision has already happened because we have to submit it at the end of April. So if we're gonna get it into the last opportunity we have to get it in the current conformity and the current tip, it needs to happen very soon, by the end of April for the May revision. Now, this is what the STIP folks have told us at TxDOT. May is your last opportunity. There's nothing etched in stone there, but this is what we've been told. You won't be able to amend the current again. You'll start operating in November or October with the new.
I wouldn't think May is necessarily possible, but again, Mr. Bielik will be asked by the commission the status of the project or projects that may be taken up. Okay.
Okay.
And
There will be a coordination on that.
like just to clarify is that we require a 30-day public comment period. So again, going back to what Roger was saying is that, you know, when we go to public comment, it's not absolute. So we can have different funding scenarios. So the idea.
Yes.
Personally think is a problem on either project. US 54 is sitting there ready to go.
Yes.
30 days doesn't, and as far as the other project, it may be, it's not added capacity, but there's still lots of work to do. I mean, the right-of-way acquisition has not even begun on that. Okay, we're good.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Thank you, ma'am.
I have a question on the cost project's timeline. Sorry, I didn't do that. The copper project's timeline, where on March, where it says copper projects for CMAQ, and March 21st is a draft, the PRFs are required. At that point, do you need the CMAQ analysis, the air quality analysis, to go along with the draft or not?
No, ma'am.
No?
You look a little bit further down, you'll see the air quality analysis is coming actually in a month or two later. And the reason for that is because it takes a lot more time to get an air quality analysis done.
Okay, so it's just kind of like a brief
What we-
summary of
right.
what we.
What we need to see next week for the draft submittal of the CMAQ projects is what are those projects?
And then I have a subsequent question. When the projects are submitted, and I believe there's a portal that you submit the projects through, but then you also require that they be emailed. So do you have to do both?
You know, it
Submit it to
became,
the
it
portal
became a
and
little
then email?
confusing. We're not gonna pin it down to one way or the other. It is right now very specific about how the draft should be submitted, but we're not gonna worry about that. We're gonna let those projects come in as they come in. If they get submitted through the eStip portal, or if they get submitted through a PDF version of the project request form, we're just asking that you please meet the deadline.
Well, and I'll tell you why I'm bringing that up was because recently the city submitted some projects through the portal, but then they didn't submit them through the email to the specific person, and so there was a time gap.
We understand that, yes, ma'am. And
So
it-
even if you submit them to the portal, shouldn't they go to the right person right then and there?
We're making sure that it does. In the meantime, we're saying, just don't worry about it, just submit it, and if it comes in on time, we're okay. So the instructions were pretty explicit about not so much who, but also how to submit those.
Okay.
But let's not get too tied up in that. We submitted, all the projects that were submitted for the TAP that came in that day, we're honoring it. And we're just asking now, just submit your CMAQ projects, ever how it works best for you. Just try to meet the timeline.
Right, and I'd just like to add that these are I'd just like to add that these are drafts that we're talking about. So we understand that there was a technical issue on our end. So like Roger stated, is that we're honoring all submissions that happened for Monday for this TAP.
Okay.
So on Monday, when we have the CMAQ, we're going to honor. So it doesn't matter if you
Okay.
send it one way or the other.
Okay.
We're going to honor all submissions that are submitted to us prior to 5 o'clock.
And again, like Mr. Medina was saying, these are drafts, and we've put this layer into the call for projects as something to try to help all of the agencies so
Correct.
that we can review your drafts to make sure that everything is okay, so that down the line, when you submit your final version, which TAP comes in next week for the final, and the CMAQ, I think the draft version comes in. I don't have the timeline right in front of me. But we've put this added layer in there so that we can get your drafts and try to help you with your PRFs to make sure there's no issues when the final one comes in, they don't get kicked back.
No, and I think that's a great idea. I really appreciate you guys doing that. I wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
No.
there-
So that when
we
staff
realize
talks
there's
to
some
me, I
technical
understand
things
it.
going on that made this a little bit more cumbersome than it should have.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Colonel?
So if I get this straight, in June, the policy board is going to approve the 2017-2020 TIP to go forward to the state to do their STIP thing, right?
You will be approving
June.
3 things at that time. The 1720 TIP to go into the STIP. You'll be approving the amended Horizon 2040 MTP and the amended 2040 conformity report
Right,
that goes
okay.
along with that. So there's
Okay.
3 documents that you'll be approving at that time.
Okay, and then the non-conformity capacity projects for 2017 to 2020 will be worked on during this time frame to be amending the hopefully approved 2017-2020 TIP with a new revised 2017-2020 TIP for the non-capacity items.
Right,
in
that,
November.
right. As all of this is going on, your call for projects is working through the process,
Right.
and we're getting the conformity. As soon as we get all that approved over here on the November timeframe where there's a STIP revision opportunity and we have our documents approved, then all of those non-added capacity projects actually come into the documents right there.
Okay, so when will the air quality analysis have to be done for those projects that will ultimately be in the November amendment?
It's on the schedule, which I don't have right in front of me, for the call for projects, which Ms. Acosta, I think, has right in front of her, Representative Acosta does, and it's right here, thank you.
Is it like
Well,
May?
So the air quality analyses for the CMAQ call for projects will be,
April 20th.
April 20, or actually submitted to us, the draft, yeah, okay, yeah, April 20th. All of your stuff is, actually, everything is due May the 13th. Your draft version of the CMAQ analyses is due on April the 18th for our review. Everything closes, the call for projects for CMAQ closes on May the 13th, and that includes the PRF, the electronic project request form. It includes your CMAQ analyses that we've already reviewed, both the PRF and the CMAQ analyses prior to that. But on that date, May 13th, everything is due as a final. And then the reason it skips all the way after that to the July timeframe for TPB approvals is because in June, you're looking at the documents, okay? So the documents are already out by the time you finally approve them, and that's why the approval of those projects, if you will, in July will catch up with the First Amendment to the STIP at a later date in November.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
Next is item number C, training hours of the members.
I think we got it.
I think you only have 4, by the way.
what we provided to the policy board is the extant tally of those members that have qualified under the educational program, which requires 5 hours. So if you have attended all of them, at a minimum, you should have 6 hours now. And so there was another training opportunity that was sent by the MPO to everybody this Monday at the El Paso Public Library downtown. There's another opportunity for training. Along with that is that we also understand there'll be other trainings that are available, other online, NHI, NTI. We've sent out a listing of that, and so if you need that listing again, please let me know. And again, is that if you're still short on hours, certainly you can call me, and I would provide training. If anybody has any questions, comments. And then certainly once after the deadline, we will send an email out to the policy board informing them who has not met the educational requirements. And under the rule is that if the training was not sufficient, is that that member loses his or her voting privilege up until it's reinstated.
Thank you.
Next, we have item number 6, monthly report or announcements.
You know, I don't have any reports. I know we, Mike, we sent out a letter. We'll be sending out letters and continue to send out letters of projects that are that are still in the system, and we'll continue to do that. We sent one out a few months back, and we'll continue to do that so everyone understands what projects are out there and if anything needs to be done on them. So, and with that, I have nothing else. Anyone else have anything?
Just gotta go back to the one thing about the training.
No.
I was glad you said that.
Go ahead, sir.
Mike, why is it just, are we restricted to the 3 months and not like, if we do major training for a week in June, that doesn't count for anything? For instance.
It does. It counts that you're more well-rounded, and we're very happy to have you with us.
Trying to lose weight, sir.
Yeah, so that works out well.
So ideally is that when the item came before the policy board, there was a time that was prescribed for the training, so it was agreed upon for 90 days. So again, is that if the body wants to change that, certainly it could be amended. But the idea is that the MPO would still come around providing training as we go through the calendar year.
Mayor Miller?
I think we can refer to this in the future as Judge Escobar.
No, it wasn't my fault.
Yeah, were you going to go back to that list where you noticed Chairman Pickett only had 4 hours? Is that what you're going to refer to?
Glitch in the email system.
Go ahead, Judge.
I am really concerned about, I mean, I have my full disclosure, I have my 5 hours. I was just telling Pat and Monica that this morning, those of us who still needed our last hour, I felt like we were the kids that had to stay after school to get extra credit. But I'm concerned about people losing their voting privileges because they didn't get to their 5 hours in the first 90 days. And I agree that if you continue to get training, it should count for something,
I mean,
you
you
know,
could
for
still
next
keep
year
a
or something.
tabulation of it. And
Right.
I could see the first 3 months as something to get everybody up to snuff.
Right.
And then now after that,
There's quite a bit of online training, though. But- And it's not through today, though. It's through the end of this month.
Yes, sir.
So we still have a couple weeks in training to make sure that everyone does get their training.
Yeah, so in theory, you have up until the next policy board.
Right.
But certainly I have, or actually my ally has contacted those members that we have identified that are potentially candidates to lose their voting privileges. So we will make every effort to let them know of the educational requirements. And again, is that if I need to meet with them to give them the training, I certainly will do that.
Mike mentioned that it's very flexible, and I'll offer something again. I've sent out stuff to my members all the time, and we have a new report on transportation reinvestment zones. We have a new report on regional mobility authorities they're very detailed. It'll take you an hour or more to review those, and with Mike's approval, I would more than happy send them to Mike, and have him send those back out, because they actually really affect what the county does and municipalities. And if you would consider that training, I mean, it's, you know, we're on the honor system, but it's something that I think
Or
that you.
sitting in traffic on I-10 on the west side for an hour, would that count?
But I will send those to, I will send both of those to Mike today.
Okay.
And if Mike wants to just send it blanketly out to all members, and ask if you would consider that being I think it's more than an hour's worth of training, each one of those
He's not looking like he
reports.
wants to consider that.
Can you give a quiz on it afterwards?
I'll read it
Yes.
first.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am?
You know, a lot of people don't have the capacity to do it during work hours. Besides online training, are there other options for outside of work hours that training can be?
So
Or is
if
it
you,
just-
if you need me to meet you at 6, I will meet you at 6.
Just wondering. Thank you.
AM, he meant AM.
Hold on. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. You know, the original intent was just because there's so much turnover frequently with board members, was to create some sort of time frame where a certain level of training has to be accomplished. It wasn't intended to, you know, put anyone in a situation where they're stressed out about losing their hours. So I don't know, would that have to go back to the executive committee, or is that something that can just be placed on the agenda to consider a potential, you know, maybe a 6-month or whatever the board might consider appropriate, an appropriate time frame? Because Mayor Murillo, for example, just got reelected, and you know, I guess she would currently fall under the 90-day rule, right? And
So as the rule states, is that upon appointment, that member has 90 days.
okay.
So
Just started.
so she's good to go.
She just started. She's panicking.
But is that something that would have to go back to the executive
Yes,
committee
sir.
or
Yes, sir.
She's panicking.
Well, again, ultimately, you're the deciding body, and so if you all agree to do that, certainly you can expand the capability of the educational program, or you can divert it back to the executive committee for a recommendation.
And I think you're right about that it was just such a large turnover and a lot to learn, and it was really important that everybody was kind of brought up to speed and kind of understood a lot of what was going on. So it was more of a helpful tool than anything else, so you're 100% correct on that.
Or you could resign today and ask to be reinstated next month.
right? That's true.
All right, that's all we have today. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.